Okay, today we're going to do a rack of ribs. Going to smoke this rack of ribs. This rack of ribs, I got this actually, found a great deal. Got these for half off. Um, they were getting close to the expiration date, so the supermarket marked marked a bunch of ribs half off. So I picked up a bunch for the freezer. Um, This is sold as a regular set of spare ribs, but it's not as big as normal spares, and it does not have the brisket bone attached, as you can see here on this end. So normally, if this is going to be trimmed up in a St. Louis cut, you would see this part here all the way trimmed down nice and evenly. Tonight, I'm going to go ahead and leave this on because of the rib tips, which is, for those that don't know, the best part of the ribs if you can get them. The rib tips are the cartilage and bone that's going to be in this area, but this is some of the most flavorful meat on the rack of ribs, this section, when you cook it right and then when you cut it up right. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these up. And when I'm trimming this up, I've already removed the silver skin here off the back, but as you can see, this has got a lot of really ugly stuff on it that needs to be trimmed out. Most of the flat meat has already been trimmed, but I'm going to go ahead and trim that back too, just to help this cook even. Could probably square it up a little bit, but again, tonight I'm not real concerned with the presentation, with how this is going to look. Just more concerned with just getting as much meat on here as possible to eat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this up and then season it up. This section here, this end here, is really fatty. Sometimes, like in a competition, you just cut this part off to trim this up to make it nice and square all the way through. But with this, again, trying to preserve as much as possible, this I don't need. I'm going to trim this off. You can see this fat here. I'm going to get in, I'm going to cut this evenly. I don't want to cut too deep because all of a sudden you can end up with a hole on the end of your ribs. So I'm going to leave a little bit of that fat, but for all of this excess stuff I'm going to trim out because all that will... So what I've done here is just rub these down with some just basic yellow mustard. You can see here, this is pretty much the scraps of what I've trimmed off here. But I'm just rubbing this down with yellow mustard. Again, this is going to help the rub stick to the ribs. And what I like about this, I'm not a big believer in getting any kind of a flavor profile change on ribs from using any kind of a undercoating. I've experimented with all kinds of things: olive oil, mustard, different vinegar, different marinades and other things like that. But as far as getting an undercoating on the for the rub, pretty much convinced it just basically helps the rub to adhere to the ribs and have a nice even coating. So I also like that once this is done, I noticed that it doesn't add any flavor, but there is there's kind of a nice black contrast that is produced underneath the red coating of the rub of the bark that's on the ribs after this is finished. So that's pretty much why I go to mustard as a default for a rub on ribs. So this is one of my favorite tools to use, especially for working with a rub. Some rubs, it doesn't matter what it looks like once it's on the meat. Some of the bigger cuts, especially pulled pork, even brisket. But with something like ribs, something this delicate, it really makes a difference not to just take a handful of rub and just throw it on your ribs. Really makes a difference to use a shaker, something like this. You can get this for $2 at Target or anywhere else that sells kitchen supplies. But get your rub made and then use a shaker like that. Let me show how I So I just put a nice even coat all the way across. And how it looks before it goes on the smoker is pretty much what it's going to look like when it comes off. So you get all the edges before it goes on. Just do that to both sides here. You can see from the shaker, this really helps to get a nice even coating. You're not going to get really thick, over-seasoned areas here. Every rib should basically have just about the same amount of seasoning. Okay, so today we're going to use the Weber, the Smoky Mountain, and this is the 18-inch here. And if I have, see the ribs here, let the rubs set up for about 20 minutes to liquefy, and now they're ready to go on the grill here. I'm going to cook these between, basically at about probably maintain around 250, 275. We're going to cook on apple and pecan wood on this, using mesquite chunk charcoal as a base. If there's one piece of advice though about this Weber, I love this. This is the go-to grill when I'm just cooking for myself. Even little small get-togethers, but the one piece of advice, one regret I have is not getting the bigger one. So if you're considering getting this smoker, definitely go for the 22-inch version instead of the 18. It's just more versatile, and as you can see, this is a standard rack of ribs, barely fits. This comes with 2 grates, but you can barely get 1 rack of ribs. I can cut them up and get 3 racks in this smoker, but just go with the bigger one from the start. That's my one piece of advice. Otherwise, this thing is like cooking with your eyes closed, basically. Just getting ready to wrap these ribs. It's been just about 3 hours that they've been in the smoker. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and put these bone side up in foil, and what I have here is about 4 tablespoons of butter, light brown sugar, and then honey. There's a lot of people, Johnny Trigg most famously, using parquet margarine, and there's a lot of interesting discussions on the internet about the danger of using butter when you wrap your ribs. But what I've found is that butter actually works much better. To me, it just comes down to a preference. If you're from the South, you're used to parquet margarine. Out here in California, we don't even have parquet margarine in our stores, so it's much harder to find. It's not something that anyone from California has a taste for. We prefer real butter, and this turns out really nice in this rib wrap. So the ribs are, again, they're bone side up. Got the honey and brown sugar on the back side of the ribs, and we're going to go ahead and wrap these up, put them back on the smoker for another hour. At this point, they've taken up all the smoke that they're going to take after 3 hours. So they have the smoke, they have the color. You can see the nice kind of brick red mahogany, classic nice barbecue color. That's what I'm looking for at this point. I certainly don't want to turn these ribs black. I don't want them getting too dark. And also, ribs, again, they're so delicate that if you do over smoke ribs, you're going to be tasting it for probably at least 24 hours afterwards. Too much smoke is definitely a bad thing when it comes to ribs. More than any other meat, I think that ribs take up smoke more than anything else that you're going to barbecue. So we're going to wrap this up, get it back on the smoker for about 1 more hour. Then we're going to check them get them out of the foil. I don't want to overcook them bone side up because as these cook in the foil, the tendency is for these things to get really tender. And if the bone side is down, that is the thinnest part of the meat. Those bones have a tendency to rip right out or to fall out if that meat gets too soft. So that is the reason for cooking these in the foil, making sure the bone side stays up. Okay, for sauce these, I just use my special paintbrush that I use just for ribs. It's a big brush. Hand clean this every time I use it. Got a lot of coverage all in one shot. As you can see here, ribs are a beautiful color even before the sauce. Get these things just glaze with this sauce and then back on the smoker and let that sauce set. Okay, and here's the finished product now after the sauce has had a chance to set up and caramelize a little bit on the outside. You can see, show you here, kind of the tenderness that we're looking for with these ribs, but you can see they're so soft that they'll just fold right over on themselves almost. But they're not falling apart, and if they're overcooked in foil, they will basically get almost a mushy consistency and texture that's it's really indicative of when you go too far and you cook too long. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these up, trim up the rib tips, and crack this beer and have dinner. Here you can see the rib tip section now. I'll go ahead and trim that off, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that into cubes. And that is the most delicious part of the ribs right here. You get a full rack of spare ribs. A lot of people trim this off and they don't even cook it or use it. But rib tips, that's where it's at if you're a rib fan. Okay, so rib tips are all cut up there, and basically there's no science really behind that. Just get them in nice bite-sized cubes and have at it. But what I wanted to show you, a couple things. One, you can see these cook perfectly. They bite and pull clean off the bone, no rip or tear. These actually taste better than they look, but you can see, if you look closely here, you can see there's bark on there's nice bark on the outside of the ribs. Kind of see that before, but if you look, there's the mustard base on these creates this nice black line. Lighting's not great here, filming this here at night, but under this artificial light you can't really see too well, but that mustard as a base to the rub really creates a nice black contrast underneath the bark. It's very nice. So, alright, well, time to finish my dinner. Thanks for watching.